afternoon, everybody. Quite a few of you are here and a few more to come. Um, Really looking forward to this presentation with I'm partnering with BDO and Carly and Yoni on this. The subject being, as we all know, the important evolution of the CFO. Um, Carly is a partner with BDO, specializing in outsourced finance function advisory services and guiding a wide range of UK businesses. And Yoni's associate director in the business services and outsourcing team at BDO. Um, and just before we kick off and really hear the most interesting part of this, rather than me, do put questions in the chat box. And the presentation, I think, is about 15, 20 minutes, if I'm right. And then we'll have half an hour or so of Q&A, which I'll facilitate, and then close off. So please, without further ado, Carly, Yoni, it's over to you.
Thank you, Mark. As Mark said, I'm a partner here in BDO, and my background is slightly unusual to becoming a partner. I've actually been an FD out in industry, and I've come back into practice. So I have some experience sitting your side of the fence, and I have sat as a portfolio FD in private equity alongside some other roles that I have held. And here at BDO, I lead our finance function of the future initiative, and the report we're going to be speaking about today is one of the initiatives I've been involved in.
And hi everybody, my name is Yoni. I'm an associate director also in our business services and outsourcing team. I work with VC, PE and scale up businesses across the UK, and I think I've got a pretty interesting job in the sense that I get to sit alongside our clients and understand what their strategic and operational priorities are and connect them through to all the great things that BDO does, and finance functions and how to professionalize, streamline and automate is just something that constantly comes up. So we'll cover some of the topics that have come out of our recent report with the ACCA today. And yeah, lovely to meet everybody.
So as I mentioned, I lead on what we call the finance function of the future, and that's an initiative around speaking to clients around the issues that they are having in their finance teams currently, because often the finance teams people have today are not maybe the finance teams they need to be able to enable the growth or work towards the strategies that the business has. And then I have been involved in the CVO report, which, if you don't mind going to the next slide, Yoni, I was going to spend some time talking through. For those of you that have read it and downloaded it, it's a very large document, but I just wanted to give you some brief highlights, but also a little bit of background and also why it's interesting to me personally. So this report was so interesting for me to be involved in. As I mentioned, I was an FD in industry myself, and I was finding my role was broadening. Every new role I took, there was an additional dimension that I was then looking after, and the historic preparation of numbers and financial statements actually became a really small part of my role, and the role widened to a much more operational based role. So I was really interested in getting involved and trying to understand if this was a trend that we were seeing worldwide. So the report that we worked with the ACCA was a global report, and it's aimed at finance leaders, CFOs, FDs, heads of finance, as well as managing directors. And the aim was to discuss the current challenges faced by finance teams. So we interviewed 100 CFOs in small roundtable approaches across the globe. And we interviewed, and it was a mixture of interview, and we also did do a survey alongside this as well. And the idea was to connect the dots between the challenges faced, tax advisory and outsourcing services that could be used to then potentially support them worldwide. There was an underlying message of trying to free up the CFO and their teams to focus on driving value. We launched a report in June 2023, but we are finding it's still creating really relevant discussions today. And one of the main discussion points in the report is around what is value. So we were finding that there's a much more increasing relevance of value to an organisation, and it's no longer just based on profit. There's much more consideration around managing the longer term versus the short term requirements of a business. There wasn't one definition of value. It did differ by sector and geography. And it was described that value itself would evolve partly through the development and the implementation of technology. Another core subject within the report was the evolution of the role itself, and this idea of, is the CFO role actually becoming the Chief Value Officer role? So the role we found was continuing to evolve and expand. The core values of the role were ethics and integrity, as you would expect of a CFO. And there was this concept of the idea that the CFO is becoming the steward of assets that generates value. And value is a very relevant component of the role of the Chief Value Officer, but it's also one of many of the roles. And then also the report looked at the relationship between the CEO and COO and the other C-suite collectively, and that it was their collective approach that drove value. It also touched on the importance of measuring and reporting value to enable people to then review what their role is within the business. Within the finance function itself, there were 4 zones that were discussed with value at the heart of the zone. One was sustainability. It was found that the finance function is now taking responsibility for this area and for the sustainability agenda, but in some instances it did depend on the size and the scale of the organisation. There was also the requirement of insight generation, this idea of the importance of data, MI, and all of the changes in technology that are coming our way. There was the more traditional role of compliance and control that many people are very comfortable with. And then there's a transactional efficiency of making sure the day-to-day was working with good process, automation, and good people. Then one of the final points within the report is, how do we ensure that we have our CVOs of the future? Most of us who are now operating at that more senior level, we haven't had training in how to be a value officer, and it certainly wasn't something that was included in our accountancy training. So there was the questions posed around, what do we need to develop the skill set of the people that will be sitting in these roles in the future, our next talent? How can we broaden their skills and ensure they're getting continuous development? The traditional pathway to CFO is now being challenged. I think there is this concept and idea that maybe we need to move around our roles in an organisation to truly then be able to move into the CVO role. The role of the accountancy qualification itself, does that need to evolve into something that's more fit for purpose for today? And then what is the challenges for the next generation to get them there? So in conclusion, value is an important concept to organisations. Value takes a longer term view of performance, and the CFO and the finance team have a very significant role to play. Whether the CVO is actually a new role is open to question. I think a lot of CFOs that we interviewed felt they were already in that role when they were the leaders of value within their business. And the challenge facing us all is, how do we develop the next generation, especially as the role continues to evolve? If we could move out, next slide, please. So how have we interpreted that within BDO? What we've decided to do is speak to our clients through the lens of this concept of the finance function of the future. So what does a good finance team look like, and what are the challenges and opportunities to being able to move their team there and then optimize the teams? So we've come up with these different boxes. A lot of them are quite self-explanatory, but I'm just going to cover a few different areas to what we were thinking around these areas. So talent acquisition and retention. Within that box, we're thinking about, what should your resource look like? Does it need some augmentation? Have you got the right people in the business? How do you keep them in the business? How are you running your payroll? How are you looking at your employment taxes? Are you considering employment plans? Disparate data, this idea that there's so many systems. There's often a lot of different systems telling us different things at different times. How do we bring that together and make that meaningful and useful so that you can make real-time decisions in the business? Analytical insights, how can we start moving away from the historic and looking towards the future? Predictive trends, and again, using technology and AI to our advantages. Digital transformation, which we've been speaking about for many years, but what do we need? What systems do we need? What processes do we need to ensure that we've got all of the support we need in the team? So is there a system or process change which will enable you to allow your people then to focus on the analysis and the value add rather than the transactional information? Risk and fraud. As finance directors now, there's lots of consideration around cybersecurity, the requirements for digital and risk insurance. This is a new area where maybe if you don't have a head of IT is now coming your way as well. There's a more traditional compliance aspect around the fact that you still need to pay people, you still need to make sure you produce management accounts, you still need to do all of your year-end reporting requirements. Innovation, what does that look like for your business and what does it mean to you? It means different things to different people. It does intersect probably with digital transformation and analytical insights. Growth and acquisition, how do you grow? Are you ready for an IPO if you wanted to? Have you got good forecasts? Do you want to expand internationally? Is MA on your radar? And then tax and regulation. As we know, we're in a constantly changing environment, especially for the multinationals. How do you ensure that you're ready for such changes? You're aware of changes in regimes. There's this idea of responsible tax coming our way with the ESG agenda. And are you set up right from a tax structuring point of view?
So there was a lot to unpack in all of that, and I guess the question we're often asked by our clients is, okay, well, bearing in mind some of the findings of the report and some of those headlines that Carly just shared around the challenges and opportunities facing finance teams today, like what's BDO's proposition or response to that? And we've spent a lot of time thinking about how we succinctly articulate what our value proposition is for CFOs and FDs grappling with the challenge of what the role entails and all the various hats and fires they might have to fight throughout their sort of day-to-day roles. And if we start at the top left there, it's fundamentally about being a strategic partner to the senior finance leaders in the business, so very much supporting with whatever the strategic agenda is, be that growth and value, acting as a sounding board to those leaders with the board, with the business, and ensuring they have all the access to the various subject matter experts within a firm like BDO, both in the UK, but increasingly overseas as well. So it's about supporting CFOs and FDs at that level, but underpinning all that as we move clockwise around this wheel. Underpinning all that will be data and systems. So as technology evolves, Gen AI is now increasingly on the agenda. How are finance teams making more of the data and the financial metrics that they are able to produce and do it in a streamlined, efficient and accurate way? So we spend a lot of time with clients talking about what platforms they have today and where that might need to be in the future. And Carly and her team are certainly experts and know what that sort of technology landscape looks like and do a lot of work to make sure that clients have the right app stack in place and can offer some support around where to optimize and where to get more value out of what they already have. And from a financial operations and compliance perspective, I mean, this is the bread and butter and core of what BDO's business services and outsourcing team do, where we offer sort of outsourced, either full or flexible support to finance teams, be that through the bookkeeping or production of financial statement type support, right through to linking up to other parts of BDO, be that tax, mergers, acquisitions, other teams that can add value based on what the business is trying to achieve. And increasingly, as Carly said, this technology trend of making sure you have the right data at your disposal and being able to play back key and accurate management information is becoming even more pressed than there's a lot of investment into data analytics tools, and we certainly find ourselves having lots of conversations with our clients around what sort of platforms they can use to take what financial information they have and report that back, be that to investors, the board, and stakeholders, to make sure that the finance team is very much adding value and leading the agenda on performance and growth and strategic areas of priority. So from a finance function advisor perspective, that is the simplest way we've been able to articulate it, and we think it captures most of the things and challenges that Carly had mentioned in her previous slide. So again, to recap, at its simplest, how do we support finance teams? There's certainly a skills gap that many of you will no doubt have noticed within sort of the accounting market, and we work very much hand in hand with the likes of FD Recruit to support with finance teams that are looking for support at various levels. We as a business offer sort of secondments, typically where businesses, out there in the market looking for a candidate full time, there's often a gap that might need to be plugged, be it doing something quite strategic like supporting a fundraise or preparing for a first audit. There's always a bench of individuals that can support from BDO until such time as you're able to recruit somebody in the engine room to support with what's going on in the finance team. From a data and management information perspective, we spend a lot of time helping shape what dashboards might look like for finance teams and finance leaders. So offering a bit of support around what might go into that, what are the KPIs and quality sort of metrics you're trying to record, and how do your systems allow you to display those. So we spend a lot of time supporting on that side too. And from a financial reporting perspective, we as a firm of accountants have a breadth of expertise and technical capabilities we can lend to our clients as they might be seeking to do something that requires a bit more technical support. That's something they're able to tap into us to support, be it acquisition, divestment, restructuring, etc. So there's tons that we can and do for finance leaders, all around this notion of finance function of the future, because we recognize that as a senior finance leader in the business, there will be plenty of priorities, and some things you may need to ask for some support on, and that's where we can certainly come in and have a conversation with you about it. So that is the bulk of the content that we were going to present today. We have a couple of questions that we'd like to get some audience participation from, and we have this nifty software called Menti, which if you have a mobile phone handy or even another tab on your screens, if you navigate to www.menti.com and enter that code below. I'm just going to quickly flick to that screen so you won't lose the code. Don't worry if you don't see it. Bear with me just one moment. Great. Hopefully everybody can still see that screen. Carly, maybe give me a little nudge if you can see that. Okay.
Great. The code's still at the top.
The code is still at the top, and I will join everybody in doing this just so I can make sure it works. So the website is menti.com, and the code is 83636253, and you should be prompted to join, and you should see that question pop up. And it would be great if the audience could drop in just some thoughts there. You just have to enter whatever your biggest challenge is in your finance team and click submit, and we should see some responses coming through.
Brilliant. So the idea here is it's great to take the temperature of you all as senior leaders. I think you'll see there's quite a lot of overlap. Just to kind of reassure you that a lot of your peers are facing some of the same challenges as you are. So just to kind of pick on a few there, workload, very common one. What have we got here? Wait a minute.
Accounting systems has come up quite a few times.
Yeah, systems, aged ERP. just give it a couple more minutes and then we'll group them together.
Yeah, retention, people, lack of skills. Absolutely. There's definitely one there around strategic skills. So yeah, it'd be interesting to get some thoughts on from you, Carly, on sort of the strategic skills that might be lacking in finance teams today.
So I think what it is generally, but the sense of this here is there's probably a bit of a feeling that you're maybe stretched a little bit too thin, and can't be all things to all people and have specialisms in every area. As senior leaders, we all have our skill sets, and at times as a finance team going through different periods of time, you need extra support. So around the systems, it's really hard to run a systems implementation, a system selection and implementation project alongside the day job. We see this a lot, and often people will select a system without really sitting down and thinking about what they want it to do and what they want it to achieve. So in those areas, we often talk about, first of all, do a review of your processes, process map everything. So first and foremost, is there any improvements you can make in your processes before you jump to then considering, do you therefore, with these processes and maybe some potential improvements around your processes, what system should you be doing this in, and is your system fit for purpose? And with that, you really need to spend some time sitting down and with your teams and workshopping what you need the system to do for you. And then you need to go out and think about, if you've done all of that work, matching those requirements with the system that you need. And that can therefore then help you with your capacity, your resource and your workload issues, because the idea is for anything that you're pulling out the system, you're doing manually, or anything you're doing in Excel, through this process you would look to hopefully try and systemize some of that work. But I also appreciate it's a huge task. It's something we support with a lot because it's such a big task, and it can be anywhere from sort of 3 months to move to a new cloud system to a year to move to a huge full ERP and more. I think I'll just touch on the providing insights. Again, this can be quite a tricky one to decide where you do it in your system, outside the system, whether or not you're able to pull data together in a data lake, whether or not you've got people that can use Power BI. It's been really clear on what information you want to see and when you want to see it, and working backwards to then make sure your data goes into the system in a way that allows you to report in the way that's useful to you.
There's definitely a trend there in some of the responses around, data, commercial insights, and how those two things blend together. So yeah, definitely echoes what's in the report in terms of challenges, but also opportunities and places hopefully to invest in the future. So I will skip to the next question. So the next one should pop up on your phone now, and this is a rating system from 1 where you strongly disagree with a statement through to 5 where you strongly agree with a statement. The first one being, we have clear and documented processes across our finance function processes. The second being, skills, we have the right skills and talent across our finance function. The third is, we have confidence in the accuracy and timeliness of our financial management information. And the final one is, we have the tools we need to provide forward-looking proactive support to the C-suite. And that should live update as people enter their responses.
Great. Well, and the good news, the highest scoring one at the moment is the financial MI, which is great. So hopefully, whilst there's room for improvement, you're getting what you need to make your decisions. Clear and documented processes. Now, the benefit of these, not that I want to sort of, teach you to suck eggs, is people then understand what's their responsibility and what isn't, who's picking something up and who isn't. It's also a really good way to see if you've maybe overcomplicated things. So if you've got a full PO process, for example, in place, and you're approving invoices and you're approving payments, do you need all of those control points? You might do, but you might not. Is there too much going to one person or one budget holder? It's just a really good way to, one, ensure everyone understands what other parts of the business do, especially as you're growing, but also understand if there are any pinch points, and too much is going on to one person, whether or not you've got the segregation of duties that you want, and also some really quick wins can often come out of that process. Right skills and talent across the finance function. I understand this is still can be a problem. We're hearing that from our clients. We have seen an uptick in the requirement for secondments for this basis. When good people move on, backfilling, it takes time. Training people up, it takes time. You're not alone. It's not easy. I'd definitely be interested in the chat if people have found anything that works for them in this area, how they can upskill people quickly, if they think there's a certain level or that they're struggling to recruit at, or any specific gaps. Be really interested to understand a bit more around that. And then the tools we need to provide forward-looking proactive support. So I think again this comes back to the technology point. It's good you're confident in your MI, but there is still some way to go to transition to the automation of the forward-looking information.
Excellent. And we've got one more question. It should come up on your screens now.
Be honest.
Because there's no 20 plus days. We ran a similar session not long ago, Carly and I, with serial acquirer CFOs, and I think there was one person that put his hands up and said, yep, 20 plus days. So that was a very, very interesting conversation we had there.
That's great. I mean, obviously, the closer we can move you to the left, the better. But I appreciate there's a lot of reconciliation work that often has to be done. There's interdependencies on other departments that might mean that closing it is time consuming. I'm sure you would all like to move your teams away from spending the first 2 weeks of the month trying to close. So you could, because then it's hard to plan for all the other work you need to do, because you only get then 2 weeks of the month to do that. Again, process systems people approach to this works really, really well. Understanding who does what when. 20 plus days on weekly reporting would be scary. Yeah, on weekly, absolutely. I think what's really interesting is I bet you all know where your numbers are going to lie at least 3 days before you end. So thinking about the fact you probably know where that number is, but it's still 2 weeks to get to the more formalized number where maybe things can be automated, or where some reasonable estimated assumptions can be made.
Great, thanks for that, Carly. So I'm going to flick back to the slides now. Just give me a shout if that's come up okay.
Yes, yeah.
Excellent. So we had some case studies to talk to, Carly.
Yeah, so just to end on a few different examples of different sort of issues businesses are facing at the moment where we've supported. Recently we've supported a private equity funded business in mapping out what their processes are, and then what their reporting and systems requirements are. So we went through a series of workshops with them. We worked on what their system specification it should look like. We challenged them really heavily on what they wanted and why. And then we just supported them through their beauty parade while they selected their implementation partner. So that was all about matching and making sure they got the right system for their requirements. The outsourcing side, so this is for some businesses, they choose to fully outsource their finance team below finance director. It works particularly well in certain sectors and segments. And that side, That's particularly for us in London. We've got a particular expertise in that in real estate and financial services and tech. I myself have a very fast growing tech company where all of their finance resources kind of focused on the forward looking, and they use us to help them close on the historicals and on the financial statements. With our secondments, what we have had is we have had multiple people in secondment where there has been quite a lot of work pre-audit to put information together. They were a bit lacking in headcount on why they recruited. We put together a lot of the working papers around acquisition accounting, and we supported their finance manager in that. And actually, alongside that engagement, we did support with some technical accounting advice, and we seconded someone in to support on the consolidation. The technical workshop, this was acquisition, and there was an impact on moving the acquired company over from FRS 102 to IFRS. So we took a workshop approach where we could sit in the room with the right people from our side who understood the technical and the potential issues that could come up from that, and it allowed the client to ask lots of questions, and it, in a really sort of inclusive environment where there was no silly question, and it allowed everybody at the end of that, it then allowed the internal finance team to know where to focus their attention and their resources. And the final one is around memo support. So often, as I'm sure you know, when you've got a lot going on, writing the technical accounting papers for the auditors can be quite time consuming. So that's where we've advised on the technical accounting support and provided the memos for use in the audit.
Great. So thank you for that, Carly. That was all from today, I guess. We've covered quite a lot of ground, and I guess the headline is, this concept of chief value officer and the evolution of the CFO. It hopefully resonates with you in your roles and the increasing demands placed on, you as an individual to support various parts of the business, and we recognize that as a firm. So there's an ability for us to support with some of the thinking around the strategic parts of the role, but also the nuts and bolts and keeping the engine purring. That's definitely something we do a lot of work with our clients. So thank you for everybody's time, and I believe, Mark, we've got some Q&A.
Yeah, well, obviously massive thanks to Carly and Yoni for that. Even I understood what you were talking about. Although I am a qualified accountant in my distant past, but I'll come on to that in a minute. We're going to be about another, I think we'll be about another 10, 15 minutes before we close, and I'll close off with some very brief comments in about 10 or 15 minutes. But I just thought that before we do that, if there's, maybe 2 or 3 or 4 sort of really burning questions that you could put in the chat box, Carly and Yoni, I know would be really interested to respond. So please go ahead and do that, and we'll try and get through 2 or 3 questions. I see that actually, and I'll just facilitate those. Stuart has asked, to quote his question, I keep hearing in the market that finance is very undervalued. Thoughts? ? So I don't know if you can respond to that fairly wide question.
Sure. I think my thoughts on that is it's changing. I think as CFOs are taking on much more responsibilities, the business partnering aspect of the role is becoming really important. So understanding kind of the wider remit of the business and sitting in the middle of it and having the oversight of so much more than a lot of the other more senior leaders, I think is really helpful. So in my experience, I found that the first sort of 6 months of business partnering have been quite hard, but then it's evolved into a much more sort of trusted relationship and encouraging people to come to you first for a discussion, because often I think there's just a misunderstanding of the wider impacts of some of the decisions that are made, and it's just trying to get people on board with discussing some of those things before the decision is made. I also think where ESG and sustainability agenda is becoming more topical, and where some of that responsibility is sitting more with the finance team. Finance teams are getting involved in some sort of really important discussions, because whilst the regulation is obviously driving people in that area, there still needs to be a strategy up front, like what's important to that business, and what do you want to be reporting on, not just what the regulation tells you. So I believe it's changing, in my personal opinion.
Thanks, Carly, for that. Adrian and Mike have made some interesting comments. Adrian's commenting, in early stage businesses, the view of finance predominantly a back office function and not that commercial and strategic driver of the business, which is Adrian's comment. Mike's made a comment that value comes back to efficiency versus effectiveness. And Stephanie's asked an interesting question about the ever-growing AI scenario. Are clients asking for assistance with determining how to use AI to do more of the repetitive tasks? I don't know if you've got thoughts on that.
So I think from our point of view, and I'll let Yoni comment on this as well, is whilst AI might open up the conversation, it very quickly goes back to kind of thinking about what processes are in place and how to do things in the best way. Now, that isn't necessarily AI, or some of it is, and some of it's been around for a long time. Things like OCR scanning, like the amount of companies I see that aren't scanning invoices into the system, for example, they're still manually keying. There's a lot of very quick wins that will improve things before you have to go all of the way to a huge change around AI. So from my perspective, it's definitely a conversation opener, and I think it generally helps support the idea that we would like our financial professionals to be adding value rather than continuing with the processing and the back office functions. I don't know, Yoni, when you're speaking to people, what you've seen.
Yeah, I think that there's two parts to it. There's the question we often get asked is, to what extent are we seeing it in clients applying it within their businesses? And that's definitely a trend that will continue to increase. We're also often asked, from a service delivery perspective, what sort of things are we implementing as a business to support clients? And certainly, our payroll colleagues have been very much at the forefront of things like robotic process automation, RPA, and making sure that something like running a payroll, can be as automated as you can, because it's recurring, it's relatively predictable at times. So there's certainly, we as a business are putting a lot of time and effort into that, because we recognize that's going to support drive efficiencies, deliver better client service. So there's an absolute opportunity to be had there.
Sorry, my mute was on there. Jan has made an interesting point and asked a question. Really, it's about hiring, and it's a fair and interesting point. And I will just read what Jan said. Hiring based on recent job titles, sector, system, etc., could move to broader thinking to encourage skills growth, including DEI, age, color, skills, sector, and finance, exec, and board roles, to encourage diverse perspectives and ideas for profit and growth. Agencies say hiring in finance is checklist, and seniors say skills lack. Slightly confused. Can I give a quick response and then pass that over to the experts? I completely get the point, and we are always engaging with clients and saying, can we broaden this out? Can we hire cross-sector, etc.? I don't think diversity is really ever an issue. People can be ageist. I totally get that. In other areas, I think all diversity is thankfully very accepted now, and we're, a forefront proponent of that. We are sometimes restricted by clients, and from the initial wide conversation, it can end up in a little bit restricted. And at the end of the day, they are paying our fees and they are asking for what they want. And I'm just being totally upfront and honest about that, even though we always try and push the boundaries. But handing over to the experts, any thoughts on that, Carly and Yoni?
I'm seeing that there's a lot more value being placed on the senior finance professionals, definitely. And I think being really clear on what you need in the business is really, really important. What you need from a skill set perspective when you're growing versus a post-event change. And I think it's okay to accept that you might need to change the people that are working for you in that environment. It makes me a bit sad to think that people think hiring in finance is a checklist exercise. I really hope that's changing. I think the fact we're talking about the notion of a chief value officer shows the fact that we're starting to see that finance professionals are really like that internal trusted advisor. And that's what I'm seeing from the clients I'm speaking to.
Thanks very much. So I think we're near the end now, and I'll close off if I may. Huge thank you, obviously, to Carly, Yoni, and BDO, and we're really looking forward to continuing to develop this relationship and making more opportunities together for everyone, including obviously everyone that's attended. And thank you, and I hope you all got a lot out of that. Just a few things to mention then before we go, and obviously thanks to everyone for attending, and do reach out to Carly and Yoni and BDO and any aspects of your thoughts and businesses that you might want to take further. Obviously, reach out and connect with me and us as well. So we'll be sending out a short survey, and be grateful if you could fill that in as well, and that will help us improve the events going forward. I'll mention something where you can collaborate with peers in a minute. Myself, briefly, I'm an accountant by background, then many years in recruitment search. I'm also a qualified coach which really helps in the hiring and I think consultative approach that we take to businesses and hiring. And we've got recruiters and consultants right across the UK. So just to mention that, we are a recruitment organization first and foremost, but this is a way of us, giving back in the holistic sort of ecosystem. But if you are hiring, we'd love to hear from you. We've also got divisions across general executive management and HR, as well as specializing in finance directors, CFOs, financial controllers, heads of finance. But I'll send out a few links in the email that will come out. I did mention that there is a CFO finance director peer group that if you go to our FD network on our website, it's called Guild, and that's a great forum for questions you might have for your colleagues, CFO and FD colleagues. But that's it, Christian. If I could hand over to you to close, and just a huge thank you to everyone involved today.